Mississippi State football is not done adding talent to its roster. Even here, now that we're at the end of spring and we're coming up on the summer months, they are still looking to add depth, and they did that over the weekend. Most notably picking up transfer offensive lineman Jamari Freeman out of Mercer, 6'4", 300 pounds, interior offensive line prospect. Began his career at Tennessee Tech and then spent last season at Mercer, where he was an all-conference player. And State had to beat out Arkansas and Auburn for him. You had SEC programs very interested. And this is an important get for State here late in the cycle. You know, we've talked a lot about the offensive line and just all the concern there, some of the optimism there coming out of spring. You feel better about the group, but definitely a position where you felt like State needed to add as many bodies as possible, guys who had done the job before and had been able to play well before. And at this point in the cycle, we were saying this after missing out on Jordan Seaton, and then obviously you then come to find out even more so after finding out that Brandon Snee was not going to be eligible. It's kind of a question of like, well, crap, like who are they going to be able to get that can step in at this point? Like, you're not adding a starter at this point, and you're probably still not adding a starter here with Freeman. This is mostly a depth addition. But to get a guy that has played a lot of football, get a guy who's an all-conference player at a lower level that other SEC programs were interested in at this point is as good as you could have asked for. And it's a pickup that I think you needed. Jeff Lebby has kind of talked quite a bit about that he feels good about his top 6 or 7 players on the offensive line. Specifically feels good about the starting unit. He thinks they're going to be able to field a top 5 that is good. But you got to be able to rotate bodies in the offensive line, man. You can't have 5 players that you can roll with and that be it. You've got to have more than that. We saw it last season. You got to be able to add bodies to the room that you trust can play. And like we mentioned, when you lost Brandon Snee, that alone, you were down a guy. And keep in mind, they lost Brandon Snee, and then they had still, even once they had Brandon Snee committed, still wanted Jordan Seaton. So kind of wanted multiple more guys in the room. At this point, you're probably not getting another one of that, but you're at least replacing what you lost with Snee. Not from a position standpoint, but from a guy that has been a good player at a lower level, maybe not ideal SEC size, but can step in and ideally be a competent player for you. And I also think you're getting a guy who gives you depth at a spot where you need it a little bit more, because the interior offensive line, especially at the guard spots, you don't have a ton of options for where you're going to turn, because you have DJ Chester as a guy that's played a lot there and is going to be one of your starting guards with Cannon Boone starting at center. LJ Prudhomme, people are really, really high on, was a starter in the spring, and we've talked a lot about that. That's a positive sign, frankly, that they're confident having him as a starter at this point. But it's a redshirt freshman, guy who hasn't done it before. After that, I think part of the reason we were talking about Blake Steen a lot as a guard is because you needed a little bit more depth there, and he's a guy who can do it. And I think that's still a possibility for him, where if you needed to plug him in at a guard spot, you could possibly do that. But after that, you really don't have a whole lot of options. TJ Lockhart, kind of. That's sort of it, right? Bringing in Freeman gives you another option at guard and a guy who can step in and play that role, and you would expect can at least be a competent player for you up front. That's what you're getting by bringing in Jamari Freeman at that position. So this is a really good addition. And that helps you out from a tackle standpoint as well, because now Steen can probably focus a little bit more on tackle as depth there. But I still think Blake Steen, I would expect, even after adding Freeman, wherever Mississippi State has an opening, Blake Steen is going to fill one of those holes and is going to step in. But now, between Miles McVay, Jakeem Shumpert-Perkins, Blake Steen, you have 3 guys at tackle you feel good about, plus Saquon Miles, Isaiah Dent are also options as well, where there's some high talent upsides. They have the frame for it. If you had to put them in the game, you potentially could do that as well. So this is a really nice pickup. You love it for Mississippi State. It helps them out quite a bit. Just getting more depth in the room. This is as good as you could have asked for in the offensive line at this point. A couple other additions from Colorado, safety Terrence Love, 6'2", 210 player. This is a guy who was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, had all the offers. signed with the Auburn Tigers, spent 2 seasons there, primarily played special teams. Took some snaps on defense, but this was primarily a guy who was out there as a special teams player. Transferred to Colorado last year. I think looking to be more of an impact on defense. Played in the season opener, and I think it was 8 snaps on defense in that game, 1 snap on special teams. Goes out of the game, though, with injury, or at least was injured coming out of that game. Missed the rest of the year with a shoulder injury done for the year. Left the team in October with no given reason, so he hasn't been with the team in several months now. But now transferred to Mississippi State. It's a special teams addition, right? This is not a guy that you're expecting to come in and compete for a starting job or even a rotational role within that safety room. I think the guy State has at safety, you don't need another guy in there to really contribute, but you probably do want more guys who can help with special teams. This is a guy that has done a lot of that throughout his career, and still has talent upside based on what he was in high school. State special teams were a struggle last year, right? So adding a guy who's got a lot of experience there can be a benefit as well. But look, you're there also at this point. You're just trying to round out your roster with guys that ideally have some talent to them. Last edition, we'll talk about JUCO defensive lineman Lorenz Cannon out of a California JUCO, 6'4", 260. So you kind of expect him to be at an edge. He's going to enroll in the summer. I'm not expecting much there. You look at the offer sheet, Mississippi State far and away the top offer there. I would imagine probably a redshirt candidate more than anything else. But 105 roster spots to fill. State had some spots to work with, and you're getting a guy. I think you're hoping for some upside, hoping to develop. They still would like to get another edge rusher. There's some guys out there they've been in talk with. There's one kid I think they really would like to get who was productive at a lower level, but it's just a matter not of whether you can make it happen. So we'll see what happens there if they're able to add another body. Again, I don't think you're realistically bringing a guy in who's going to compete for a starting job. But if you could get someone who's some depth, who has played a little bit, that would be a benefit at that edge position as well. But look, the pickup of Jamari Freeman's a big one. That's a nice addition for this team. So a good spot to be in here late, adding some more depth at offensive line.